So today, this is our second Facebook Friday. We're doing a 10-minute takedown, a really short, sharp, focused insight into what virtual learning is. And this is part of our 30 days of learning inspiration on the lead up to the biggest learning technology conference in the world in London at the end of January. And Joe will be there as well at that conference. So part of what we do here in Logic Earth is that we help people bring the digital learning revolution to life and indeed to their workplace. The digital learning revolution is all around us. It's how we can learn outside of the workplace. We find it very easy to find the content we need. We can speak to a friend, we can speak to experts. We don't really have many challenges learning outside of the workplace, but it seems that once we come into the workplace, we go from this colourful world outside of the workplace where content is abundant and really engaging to stuff in the workplace that just doesn't really capture our attention and doesn't really help us fulfill our career aspirations. So Joe is an expert on the topic of virtual learning, and what I'm going to ask Joe to do for the next 10 minutes is to talk to us about where virtual learning fits in the digital learning revolution, what virtual learning is indeed, and how to do it well. And if you can do that in 10 minutes, you'll be high up on my list of expectations. So
I'll do my best.
Okay, no problems.
Okay, so what is virtual learning? So you could argue that we're doing a version of that now. It's using the internet to connect with other people and be able to learn. So often we call it the virtual classroom, because what we're trying to do is take the elements of an everyday face-to-face session that we're used to and putting it online. So, you know, slides that you might see, flip charts, seeing people, being able to talk to each other, doing all of those kind of activities, except you are one person at your computer connecting maybe around the world with other people at their computer. So when I'm helping people to design virtual classrooms, often they get caught up in the technology, which is obviously, it's understandable. But I always say to people, look, don't worry about that bit. Worry first of all about what's the business need, what's the thing that the person needs to do at work. How would you normally cover that in a really good quality face-to-face session? So it could be a discussion, an activity, an assignment, something at a flip chart, at a whiteboard, post-it notes, you know, all of those different things that we can do. And then usually, probably 9 times out of 10, there's an equivalent or even sometimes better that we can do in a virtual classroom. And we can just translate it. There are differences, there are changes. We have got a new skill set we've got to learn with the technology. But if you're a really good face-to-face trainer, you can be a really good virtual classroom trainer as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Joe. I remember the first kind of webinar I did was way back in the mid-90s. And at that point, the tool set was really limited. We didn't have polling, we didn't have breakout rooms. We certainly didn't have, you know, the chat sort of tools that you can use to ask questions. It's gone much more than just kind of presenting online. It's actually took on a whole set of interactive techniques that weren't available to us before. So how do people get to grip with the specific interactive techniques that are that work in a virtual learning environment that may not necessarily work in a classroom environment? So getting beyond the I suppose the idea of, you know, transforming from classroom to virtual learning actually lets us do something different as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because there are 2 elements here. One is we've got to learn the actual technology. So that's a general technology, like you say, polls, breakout rooms, and so on. And there's a variety of different things that you can do. But also we have to learn the specifics of our platform. So the way that something works in Adobe Connect is different from WebEx, different from Cybermeeting, different from Zoom. There's a lot that's similar across those platforms and you can translate, but some things will have to be different. I teach the same class, and if I do it in different platforms, I might have to ask my poll question in different ways, or structure an activity just slightly differently because of how the platform works. So that's some nuance there. But before that, I think the biggest point is actually our own mindset of it can work, and understanding how that works. So a lot of people that I speak to have been classroom trainers for 10, 15, 20 years and don't quite see how doing something remotely without seeing people and losing the body language and eye contact is a huge thing, how that can possibly work. And so it's my job to help them deconstruct what they do in a face-to-face classroom and understand which tools you rebuild that with in a virtual classroom. So an example that I usually give is, I'm delivering, let's say I've got a few minutes of content that I'm delivering now. And normally what I do is I look around the room, I do that kind of sweep, and you can interpret the body language very quickly of you're bored, you're interested, you don't get it, and so on. And I can't do that online because I can't see people. But by understanding the tools that I've got available to me, I can then go, okay, let's ask a quick feedback icon question, a closed question, green tick if this, red X if that. And then build on that with, well, if you put a green tick, type something in the chat window about it. And actually only one person put a red X. Let's unmute your microphone and talk about it. And then the follow-up question is, on a whiteboard, let's all sketch out our ideas, or let's do a version of a post-it note activity and move things around if our software allows us to do that. So it's understanding all of those things that we do face-to-face, how we deconstruct and then just rebuild it in a virtual classroom.
Yeah, so you actually design and planned interactivity just the way you would in a classroom session. And as you say, you look at the specifics of the platform you're using, and you get the nuance of how those tools can help that particular virtual learning session. And are there any,
and actually,
are there
on
any
that point
that you would say are off limits to online learning or virtual learning? Because it seems to be that we're doing everything online these days. Is there anything that you think is better online versus offline?
I think a lot of stuff is better online if it's done really well, because what you get with virtual classrooms is you get a reduction in cost, so you don't have to pay for the accommodation and the travel, and actually there's a resource that you're losing. Every hour that I'm traveling, I'm not either at home in my own time or doing work for the boss. So there's a resource that we can lose there as well. Also, what happens with virtual classrooms is you usually don't do more than a couple of hours online. You can do an hour, 2 hours, you can do 3 hours, you could do a whole day if you design it really well, but usually you're maxing out at about a 2-hour session. Yeah. So actually, if you had a 1-day class, you wouldn't normally do a 1 day online. You'd break that up into maybe 3, maybe 4 different sessions that you deliver over a week or 2. And that usually fits in people's working lives a bit better. And actually, it's a much better methodology because people can acquire learning before the session with some really good quality digital learning, PDFs, videos. I see Martin is here and he's a huge proponent for video learning. So hi, Martin. It could just be a PDF. It could be an e-learning module, all of those things. And then you've got that time to discuss and really build in that great quality interactivity and learning together. And then time afterwards to process it, to reflect on it and apply it before your next session. So that's a really important thing to be able to go and do in that sense with virtual classrooms. Also, I think it's really good because people can join from anywhere. So if you're national, international, different time zones, you've got people working together from across those different regions that might not normally be able to do so. And it's cost effective as well. And if you design it really well, I think you can get a lot out of it that you don't get face to face. There are always differences, and face to face is going to be absolutely the right thing in a lot of instances. And there's a lot of stuff that when it gets to really hands-on stuff that people are having to do practically, obviously face-to-face sessions are the way to go about that. But you can do an awful lot in virtual sessions with things like webcams, people recording videos and uploading them, taking pictures. You can do a lot of the stuff around the practicality of something with photos and activities and discussion points, even if you're not doing the actual practical element. And I think that's something that people often underestimate, is how practical you can get, and then people are in a much better place to go and apply that practicality then afterwards.
Yeah, and that's a great point because I was mentioning about how virtual learning tools, webinar tools have kind of moved on in the last 10 years, and really they've got so dynamic that you can bring people on camera like we're doing today. You can actually do kind of really live group work. You can share screens from nearly any application you can think about. So really, you're only limited by your imagination in terms of how you structure the session. Going to kind of wrap up in the next minute or so, Joe. Time has flown, and thank you very much for all of those tips. So I'm thinking of your average kind of corporate learner who maybe hasn't got a really good vibe about traditional e-learning and hasn't really had the benefit of a really good online facilitator. If they were going to bring, and particularly say L&D teams in large corporates, if they were going to start to bring this brand of virtual learning that we've been talking about today into their organization, where would they start? Obviously, apart from talk to you, where would they start?
Yes, other service providers are available. Yeah, well, I mean, finding out what it is and what it isn't, going on maybe some webinars that are really good quality is a good place to start. And because so many people have been on webinars that aren't interactive, they don't work, blah, 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 and they get that negative element to it. So going in and asking people, including me, including you, the people on this chat, what's a good webinar or webcast to go on to? I see that Josh is watching, and Josh I know through the TLD chat, which is 4 p.m. every time from a UK point of view. And what that is, that's a webcast where we go and discuss things. It's a different way of doing things. So by asking people, going on webinars, I've got a website at lightbulbmoment.info. I've got a blog there with loads of information and resources on, and there's all that available from other people as well, to go and have a look at those kind of things. What I'm finding people are really responding to when we're going into organisations and helping them is actually doing a webinar for their company in the first instance. So all of their trainers, their salespeople, their subject matter experts, whoever wants to come along, just to find out, what is this virtual classroom thing? Why should we care? And basically, how good can it actually be? And by the end of that webinar, people are going, wow, I didn't look at my email once, I was really engaged. There are all these techniques that Joe's modeled. And from there, they can go, okay, now I can see this working. So it's about experiencing it done really well, and I think is the key thing.
Okay, so definitely, I mean, you're only limited by your imagination, and if we bring this back into the round of this digital learning revolution that hopefully we're at the start of, my kind of vision for this digital learning revolution is that we stop giving people poor learning experiences, and we start working with them to really engage them in their jobs, engage them in their career development, and it's about no one ever feeling lonely about having to do their job well, that help is always on hand, whether that's on-demand content or on-demand webinars or connected to a group of experts. All of this stuff we can do outside of the workplace, and we do all the time, but we just haven't cracked this nut of the digital learning revolution for the workplace. So thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much for finishing our second Facebook Friday. Next week, we are talking about self-directed learning. We're talking about content curation, and we're talking about personalization with Stephen Walsh, who's an expert in that area. So please join us, and thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.